Our guest on the show today is Brendan Burke, who is the head coach and general manager of Hartford Athletic. Coach Burke has been leading the Hartford Athletic soccer team since December of 2023 and has produced some great moments for the team and the city these last few years. In 2025, Burke led the Hartford Athletic team to the Jägermeister Cup final, where they beat the Sacramento Republic to bring home the club's first ever trophy and the city of Hartford's first piece of silverware in 25 years. In addition to his time with Hartford Athletic, Coach Burke has spent time coaching in the MLS with the Houston Dynamo, as well as in the USL, coaching for the Colorado Springs Switchbacks. Coach Burke is a graduate of Boston College and a native of Massachusetts, and now finds himself living back in New England here in Connecticut. We're excited to have Coach Burke join us for a conversation on coaching and getting the most out of a team. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm really excited. Today we have Brendan Burke on with us, the head coach and general manager of Hartford Athletic. Thanks for coming in, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really cool. Brendan and I were just talking about our Irish heritage and backgrounds, and we'll save that for another episode. But we're really glad that Brendan has made his way to Hartford to lead Hartford Athletic. And we know this because we had a chance to partner with Hartford Athletic last year through CCEI and our Build Hartford program. And right at the same time, you guys were actually heading to the Jägermeister finals. Okay. And of course, you won. Yeah. And it was a big deal, not just for Hartford Athletic, of course, but like bringing some silverware back to the city of Hartford for the first time in a long time.
We know how well UConn does in that department, but I think it was the first professional trophy in 25 years for the city.
Yeah, and it's great. It was awesome. I think we've been longing for that type of success. We know that the soccer community there at Dillon Stadium really has embraced you guys from day one, and so you're probably having a lot of fun. So we'll dive into that in a minute, but let's kind of take a step back and let's let our listeners get a chance to know you, Brendan. So tell us, where did you grow up, and how did you get involved with soccer early days?
Grew up in Hopedale, Massachusetts, where you still don't lock your doors.
Nice.
It's about 45 minutes from Boston, hour and 10 from here.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of our want to move here, you know, to leave MLS and be in a smaller market. But it's been the right decision. It's been a great move. Spent 10 years in Philadelphia with the Union, who are a flagship team now in MLS. Yeah. So that was a great learning curve for me. I had many great managers of people, of organization. You know, I learned a lot there. Yeah. That was better than any course I ever took in school, or, you know, they say experience, there's no replacement for that. So exposure to a lot of great people. Spent 2 years in Colorado Springs and had just extended my contract, but then got sucked back into MLS in Houston and only spent 1 year there. But we won a trophy, we're in a final, and then this opportunity came up. So a little bit of a military family the last couple of years, which my wife doesn't always appreciate, but they were all positive moves. They were all upward moves in their own way. You know, it's a lot more responsibility being a general manager and a head coach than it is being a top assistant in MLS. Yeah. You know, my focus there was very much on managing the locker room and the captains and, you know, making sure that we had our tactical plan set. This is much bigger picture, the stuff we're doing now. Yeah,
that's really cool. We were actually chatting just before we came on. In your playing days, you were actually over in Sligo in Ireland playing for the Sligo Rovers 20 plus years ago, give or take. And now you're coaching. One of the questions as we kind of dive into this season with our coaches is ask them a little bit about like when or how did you realize that coaching was going to be your profession, that was the thing you wanted to do? What was the light bulb or the trigger thing that happened for you?
When I failed there, honestly, when I failed there to break through as a foreign player, because there's limitations on, and I failed to reach it at the MLS level here. So I kind of hit a ceiling as a player, but I recognized that I could add value somewhere. So I had actually reverted to Reading, Pennsylvania, which is just about an hour outside Philadelphia. And there was a premier development league. It would be like Cape Cod Baseball League type thing. So I went and captained that team, and I was coaching the youth, and, you know, so I was making an okay living. I was surviving, I would say. Right. And the head coach happened to leave, and I said, this is my moment. I'm only 25 or so, but this is my opportunity to try to actually lead the group as the primary point person, as the head coach and general manager.
When we think back to our early parts of our career, for those of us who have a little bit more experience under our belt, you often try to revert back to things that you learned along the way, or like lessons or mentors, and you pull from those who you learned from. When you took that early job and you think back to the coach that you were then, what were some of the things that were most important to you when you got started? Like, what did you rely on or fall back on, or lessons did you go to?
Yeah, early on, I didn't have a huge library.
Right.
I didn't have all the management skills that I was going to need along the way. I didn't have anything. I had what I knew as a player, what I lacked as a player, and I knew that recruitment was going to carry me for a couple of years. So I focused almost solely on recruiting the best players in the country to come to Reading, Pennsylvania, which was a challenge in and of itself.
For sure.
Because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But what we were selling was, if you want to win and we can put a locker room full of the best players together, I can somewhat keep us on the right track.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know what I was doing at that point.
Yeah.
But we went to the national semifinal in the first year, and so recruitment gets easier as soon as you show a modicum of success. And then I'm gaining experience year over year. You know, now I've made mistakes in games, in training sessions. I've run a training session too long. I yelled when I didn't need to yell.
Yeah.
I stopped it too early. I, froze it for too long and just talked, which I can do, obviously.
Yeah.
So you're learning along the way, and that's the best. If you have that opportunity to throw yourself in the fire, like when you're young.
Yeah. So you talked about something that we spent a lot of time on the podcast talking about, and that is like that learning and growth and just taking a moment to reflect. So I'm going to ask you, like, as a coach, it can be difficult because you've got a lot of players involved. You have this ultimate outcome of winning, yet you also need to maintain the locker room. You got to keep chemistry. You got to keep culture going on. You're also worried about your profession. It's your job, right? So you're kind of sometimes looking over your back. What do you think allowed you to learn? And by that, I mean, like, were you intentional about your reflection? Were you asking for feedback? Were people giving it to you without being asked for? Like, how did you grow and recognize that you'd stop yourself from talking too long, or you might run the session longer, or you might hold the guys accountable or not hold the guys accountable? Like, where did that growth come from?
It came from just being a sponge. It came from being a gym rat. My own son is kind of a gym rat now. He's 10 and he's in the locker room and he's just absorbing everything that goes on. I was like that as a young adult. I would go to the Philadelphia Union practices, or I would go to any high level environment that they would allow me to be a fly on the wall. And I would just stand there and watch everyone's mannerisms, everyone's interactions. And I tried to take some of that stuff back with me to my own environment. Right. But ultimately, what I found early on, while I didn't really know what I was doing, and there are still times where I don't really know what I'm doing in certain situations or settings, is over communicating individually, not to a group, not pontificating, not telling everyone this is how you do it because I've done it and I hadn't done anything. Right. So it was conversation with individuals. It was feedback from players even. Right. It was talking to not even just the captain, but maybe our most talented player. Why don't you think you're getting the ball enough in this situation? And just let people talk.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we've seen and evolved in not just sport, but in business, that the way that we approach leadership has shifted dramatically, I would say, over the last 40 years, where when we look back to maybe the 1980s, it was, this is how it is, get on the bus or get out of the way. Now we're at a place where it feels as if the best managers are the ones that are listening first and then reacting to the information that we're getting second. Let's talk a little bit about maybe how you've changed. We go back almost 15 years ago, those first jobs, and I think you fall back to what feels normal or what we learned. If you were to reflect back about the things that you've evolved the most at, maybe the thing that you're most proud of, what have you shifted in regards to your mindset or approach when it comes to coaching over the years? Like, what's changed the most dramatically if you look back?
Yeah, coaching, and I would assume senior management outside of coaching comes with a lot of pressure because ultimately the results fall at your feet. Yeah. And you're the first one to go, especially in my profession. You're the first one to go, and you can go quick in certain professional coaching environments. So the biggest way that I've evolved, I would have those conversations. I was open. I was willing to receive information as much as give it, but ultimately I made every final decision every day. I ran every training session. Now I delegate 90% of my day, but I build in a structure on the front end, expectations, timing, morning meetings that never change, things that people can rely on as touch points with me in case something's off the rails. And then I go back to recruitment. If you have the right people in those places and you teach them for 3 to 6 months, you can do this. And then you can focus on something bigger.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about with our entrepreneurs here in the center is delegation. And it's really hard, right? When you are
It took me a long time.
Yeah, when you're responsible and it falls on you, requires a lot of trust. What is it that you feel like has allowed you to have that trust? And obviously results matter and performance matters, but do you think that as you gain wisdom that you recognize that trusting process like has to be there? Like, was there something along the way where maybe you didn't delegate, or a moment where you kind of look back and go, that was the mistake that I made?
That's interesting. If there was one point where I think I was taking on too much work, it was in Philadelphia. I was the assistant academy director for the MLS franchise. I was the assistant coach, one of the assistant coaches of the first team, so the MLS first team. I was the head reserve team coach, and I was the head PDL coach. Yeah. So I would leave for work at 6 a.m. and I'm home at 11 p.m. And it was just my wife and I at that point, so it was somewhat manageable, but I broke down by the end of the year. Physically, mentally, I was not myself. And that's when I realized that I was going to have to find a higher level position where I didn't have to do all those things, but some of those things weren't even really enhancing my monetary value. They were just enhancing my experiential base. Yeah. And I wanted that, but I wanted it too bad. Yeah. I wanted it too much and too fast. Yeah, and I had to back off.
Yeah, there's something interesting about that, recognizing you actually said the phrase, like, it wasn't myself. And if you think about, there's nothing more than we want from our coach than to be authentic, right? Yeah. Like, we want our leader to feel genuine and true and to be able to recognize, I'm not being the best version of myself. How can I possibly lead from a place that doesn't even feel like me? Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. So check this out. So we grow so much over time. I think there's so much that we learn about ourselves through our players or through our employees or through our partners. What's something that you feel like your players have taught you? Like, what information have they almost given back to you or reflected back to you that's allowed you to lead more confidently because you've had an increased sense of self-awareness?
They're just so appreciative. They help me understand, we have a very eclectic team in Hartford, but I've always had a very eclectic team. So I've been lucky enough to explore South America, Central America, Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and on a pretty regular basis for almost 20 years now. Cool. Yeah. And a lot of these guys are from places where nothing is the expectation. So when they're afforded things like free lunch because it comes with training and things like that. And, I started to realize the real value of money. I started to realize the real value of people's time because they're separated from their families for sometimes 9 months, 10 months at a time. And all they're thinking about is getting back together. Luckily, technology's evolved so they can keep in touch. But I've learned more than one thing from my players, and to be appreciative of the opportunity that the day presents in front of you when you're thinking, oh, I have a bill, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. It's like, no, go attack the day, have fun.
Yeah, that's so cool. Let's talk, you mentioned Hartford, and you're a Massachusetts native and you've traveled the whole world, and here you find yourself just outside of Hartford. And we are positioned in Hartford here as the center and associated with UConn. We've our Build Hartford program. We've been spending a lot of time in the center, kind of diving into the story of Hartford. I just got to take a moment on the interview and say, like, what's Hartford been like for you, and like what's that experience been like? Because we know Dillon's got great history, the stadium you guys play at. I've been down to a number of games. There's good atmosphere, there's good culture there. What's Brendan's perspective of Hartford? Like, how have you kind of embraced this?
I didn't know what to expect because I grew up an hour away, but a lot of extended family in Springfield, Agawam, all those places.
Okay, cool,
So I was somewhat familiar with where it was and what it is, what it's known for, or what I thought it was known for.
Yeah.
It's been one of the nicest places we've lived, and we've lived a lot of different places, obviously. And, we're in West Hartford, but the whole of Hartford it's drivable, it's clean, it's friendly. The weather's great for about 6 months, 7 months. This year being the exception. Yeah. But no, we've genuinely enjoyed our whole time here. What's
the standout, not necessarily good or bad, but what's the standout kind of nature of Hartford's fan base and culture compared to, you've been in a big marketplace like Philly. Philly's big market, right? And Colorado is such a sports-centric location, right? They really care deeply about their sports. There's so much sports performance going on out there. Hartford maybe doesn't necessarily have that. It flies on the radar maybe to some degree. Like, what's the standout thing about Hartford's kind of sports culture that you've experienced? I said it in my introductory press conference, which was only a few days removed from the West Final with Houston. I drove right up here with my dad, and I spoke from the heart when I said the first thing I recognized about this fan base is the first 4 or 5 years were so bad here. Yeah. The grit. And I love that, and I've built it into the fabric of our team. I talk to them about that. That's cool. Like, these people show up. Yeah. And they showed up when most people would stop showing up. 100%. And that's a Boston trait too. I think it's a Northeast trait in general. Yeah. But I recognize that right away in this fan base. And now we've given them something to get excited about and to hold on to. And like 30 of them flew out to Sacramento last year to celebrate with us after the final. That's awesome. I think that those of us that are really local, we knew that. The franchise really felt like they wanted to create success. They wanted to give it. We weren't finding it. Yeah. Point blank period. Like, you would look at the headlines and go, geez, that's another tough season. So I know, as somebody that's been around and really supporting the Hartford community through our work, through the program here at UConn, that win meant a lot, right? That Jägermeister Cup final win was huge because it lifted the morale for all those fans, and they were rewarded. And like I said, we did a piece, we interviewed a number of the supporters, and they were there from day one, and they were, just so proud of the team. Let's talk a little bit about coaching. And we know that there are parallels between sport and business. We've talked about this a lot on the show. One of the things that I always believe is that founders, so we deal with some founders and entrepreneurs here, we deal with business leaders, and they usually have their non-starters, right? They're non-negotiables, where you say, look, like, this is my value. This value drives at the center of who I am and what I do. What's Brendan, as the head coach, what's the maybe core value philosophy that you bring to your team that you've kind of learned over the years? And when you showed up, you said, this is going to be at the core of what we do. Well, I grew up in a very sports-centric family, and at the core of sport is entertainment. So I said, we're going to be fast. We're going to be one of the most athletic teams. We're going to play forward as fast as anyone in the league. We're going to try to score a lot of goals. I want it to be a place where people go and they're walking through the door just waiting for something to happen. Yeah. I don't want it to be a grind. I don't want it and sometimes it has to be in sport, tactics. Yeah, making decisions, Right. You have to make decisions to win games, but ultimately I want our ethos to be front foot, fast, aggressive, in your face type of stuff. That's awesome. So I think that really suits Hartford as they kind of work on, their own brand, probably is regarded as kind of being a little bit old school and sometimes slow. And people talk about the taxes, they talk about the lifestyle. And I think for a team head coach to come in and say, like, we're going to play fast and aggressive and be entertaining, it's something really different. Yeah, that's certainly, there's an appetite for it. There's no doubt about that. I think people that are listening maybe and haven't been to a game would be excited to come down and say, okay, like, that sounds like something to be entertaining. I would just recommend get down by field level and watch one of these guys run. It's breathtaking. Yeah, right. Yeah. The speed of the game, as somebody who grew up playing soccer, the speed of the game is just it's unbelievable. How much it's changed in the last 25 years is unbelievable. When you think about parallels or overlaps between what you've learned as a coach of sporting athletes and what it might translate to the business world? Because you're in business. You said something really cool before the show started. It's like soccer is unique because you're not just buying and recruiting players, you're selling players. And so you're trying to build a product, you're trying to develop players because they have value to the club. Yeah. What have you learned about managing people from a sporting standpoint that you think, would be valuable to anybody that's managing people out in the world?
You have to build a marketplace around your business. And for me, that's a global marketplace of agents, of other general managers or sporting directors, coaches. It's keeping in touch with the people that have had a positive impact on you, but also some people who haven't, who the light bulb might go on for them later, or in my case, for me, it went on later in a couple of relationships. Yeah. But maintaining as many of those relationships as you can will present you with opportunities that you know nothing about right now, 2 years from now.
I love that. That's a really cool answer, and not one that we've heard too often on the podcast in regards to like thinking about, one of the things that we should be doing throughout our lives is maintaining relationships as best for as deep and as long as we can. And I've kind of tried to live that in my own values, being like, because you never know when that individual is going to become, an ideal resource. It's really unique for you because it's literally a resource, right? But I think for anybody out there, right, the people in our lives are the number one and best resources that we're going to have to solve problems or to overcome challenges or to go and build our own team. That's really neat. Do you have anything that's unique to you that you try and do, or have you learned anything over the years in terms of how you maintain relationships? Because it's not easy, right?
It's not easy, and there's not enough time in the day for any of us. Right. Sometimes it's hard enough to get dinner on the table and have the four of us around the table, which we try to do every night. But I think the biggest key is, for me, I can't always make conferences because I have a very restrictive schedule, but those are a great way to interface with a ton of different people. For my wife and I, we're part of a kind of a unique family office called Meet Perry, which is a different spin on a fund of funds, where people who are like-minded, who like investing and things like that, get together and learn from CEOs. We have a different speaker in a different city every couple of days. Oh, cool. So it's not always just tied to my job and picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, Bill, how's it going?" It's a really deliberate getting outside my bubble to grow the bubble, I guess.
That makes actually a ton of sense. And one of the things that, I, as somebody who does coaching and training and development, one of the tactics that I've used, particularly working with executives or like kind of leads, is to say, go leave your industry and go hang out with people that are leaders in a different industry. There's so much that you can learn. You take a GM or a restaurateur who opens their shop every night, right? And the pressures of delivering every single night. And you bring that type of pressure back to a manufacturing space or to an engineering space, there's a lot that can be learned. So I think that's a really great approach for our listeners to be thinking about, hey, if I want to grow, I don't need to just grow in my industry. Like I need to grow sometimes with my peers that are in other spaces. Here's a question that comes from my world. I do coaching of both, professionals, but also coach some athletes along the way. One of the things that I think has become more challenging as we've seen the generation shift is getting players to take ownership or responsibility of not just their performance, but like of team culture. What advice, tips have you learned along the way to try to help to get your players to take ownership of the culture, to take ownership of where the whole thing's going? Not in saying it's not just on me, the head coach, right? This is on you guys and gals too to take ownership of this.
Yeah, I've seen it done different ways. I've seen senior leadership groups who would come in and sit with the coaches, usually the head coach and the top assistant coach, and we would just have a coffee with them or listen to them. Or sometimes it's you have a very clear leader in the locker room and you have a captain. Yeah. Right now, Jordan Scarlett is that for us in Hartford. Nice. Just a guy who does it by process and everyone else can see it. First guy in, last guy out, that type. But also will bark, will get in your face, will grab you by the shirt if he has to, so I don't have to. So again, it goes back to delegating the ownership of the space. But it's also about, I want Jordan to know, and I would say it in front of a million people, but I said it to him first. This is your team.
Yeah, have the
and we're going to build them in your image, not in mine. Because you are on the field. And once you step on the field, there's only so much I can do to help you. And I would imagine that in some senior leadership positions, you're sending them out into a marketing campaign or something like that, where if I'm sitting back as a CEO or a chief executive, I there's only so much I can do to reel that back in once it's out there.
Right. Absolutely. And I think the piece about, accountability is where it all kind of starts and finishes, and getting players to take accountability, not just themselves, but of each other. I think that to me is something where it's become more difficult in the business world, where we've become a bit fragmented. We have remote, we have hybrid, we're in different places. And I'll just say, and we had a coach on a few episodes ago, but I think there's just something beautiful about sport where you step inside the lines and the accountability is there, because at the end of the day, there's a scoreboard, right? And it'll give you the results. And usually more often than not, it'll tell the truth, right? In most cases. And so you get a bit of feedback in that way. And I think, jokingly, but seriously, I think there's almost something exciting and fun. If we could bring a few of those sporting elements actually back into the business space,
I think it would help people.
There'd be a lot of people. Yeah.
And the other thing I haven't mentioned is read about people who interest you. Like I've always done that. Popovich and Zidane and some of these, great leaders in sport. And why? Why are they great leaders?
And what made them great? What was their process?
Right.
Okay. This has been amazing. We're going to wrap the interview up with our 3 rapid fire questions for all of our coaches that are coming in this season. So hopefully you're ready to go on this one, Brendan. Okay. So the first one is, as a coach, what is something that you used to care a lot about in the past that is not as important to you today? What changed?
I would say last Saturday. Yeah. Anytime I used to dwell for weeks on a loss. I would go into a dark place for, I think I saw something about Coach Hurley with this, where he was taking it home and his wife was like, take the trash out, like on to the next task. And my wife and I have had that dynamic over the years. Like I took everything personally. I wallowed for days. I overthought things. Now it's quick analyzation of what happened, what could be different, and then it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
You can't impact it, but you can impact next Saturday, and you can impact what your kids see on Sunday and Monday.
Yeah, that's great. And I also think, having a partner or having a support system, whatever that looks like, and having somebody to hold the coach accountable is so critical too. And having that person that says,
that's
hey,
a
look,
full-time job.
Yeah. And it's, and they're just as important as any of the other jobs in the system too. Second question, as a coach, in your opinion, what's more important, motivation or discipline?
Motivation.
Interesting. Tell us a little about that.
Without hesitation, I would say motivation. I had a lot of coaches who berated you or yelled at you, or, so even when I was doing really well and things were going great as a youth player into college and all that, I just remember checking out or tuning out those people. And then I wasn't developing because I wasn't getting the information, because I was like, you're an asshole, I'm not going to listen.
And you shut down.
So I never went there at any point in my career. What I will do is once a year, I'll flip a table or something in the locker room to wake everyone up.
Yeah, hold a bit of
and I'll raise my voice and say things I probably shouldn't, but I do it once a year pretty deliberately, and I never know when it's going to come. It just comes. Other than that, I literally do not raise my voice at any point throughout the process.
Yeah. I love all that. And I think it's great is that it's become intentional and it's deliberate. And I think maybe to an outsider, they don't understand that. But I think great coaches understand when the time comes that sometimes you have to get the attention of your team. And sometimes that's what it requires.
I saw Rick Pitino do it to his team a couple of weeks ago. I just saw it online or something. Or my wife actually sent it to me. She was like, this is awesome.
And ripped them. And they went out and they beat UConn. Pretty good. Pretty good in the Big East final. Yeah, for sure. As a coach, do you get more joy from coaching an ideal player or from a challenging player?
So I referenced someone because you tipped me off on this last question. there was a guy, Hector Herrera, who's captained Mexico in 3 World Cups. I don't think he was the captain for all 3, but we're talking that level player. Played at Atletico Madrid. And so I went in Houston as the top assistant coach without much of a track record compared to people like him. And there were other players in that locker room that were just higher level people than me, quite frankly. And I was running the day-to-day prep for tactical and video and all this stuff. And our manager is much more experienced than me, and Ben Olsen at the time. But my interactions with Hector were absolutely constant. And earning his respect was insanely difficult. Earning his respect, though, was also like one of the pinnacles of my career because I recognized his greatness. He didn't see much in me, I would assume, in the beginning, and it just came over time. And when you win together and so for me, it's not the most talented player or the most difficult player. It's the guy who's both.
Yeah.
If you can win that guy over, like that's a career maker for me.
Yeah. I love that answer. Brendan, I love having you on the show. Thanks so much. For our listeners who are out in the Hartford area, get down and check out a Hartford Athletic game at Dillon Stadium. There's nothing else like it in town. The atmosphere is fantastic, and the team is winning games to no small part of Brendan's contribution. So we're glad to have you here in Hartford.
Thanks, Rory.